I used to believe something most people probably believe. That prices are just prices. If something says $45, you pay $45. If your bill says $82, you pay $82. No questions. No conversation. No negotiation. And honestly, asking for a discount always felt awkward. Almost rude. But one weekend last October, my roommate's mom visited us. And in just 48 hours, I watched her save money in ways that completely rewired my brain. Farmer's market. Antique shop. Even her internet bill. She didn't argue. She didn't pressure anyone. She simply asked. And the craziest part? Most people just said yes. By the end of the weekend, she'd saved around $70 across completely normal interactions. And I realized something that made me feel both amazed and a little embarrassed. Because the biggest difference between her and me wasn't knowledge. It was confidence. And one sentence she said that weekend still echoes in my head months later. Everything is a conversation. People just forget to have it. When my roommate told me his mom was visiting for the weekend, I didn't think much of it. Parents visiting college apartments isn't exactly unusual. Usually it means a quick hello, maybe dinner together, and someone quietly judging the state of your kitchen. And honestly, our kitchen deserved judgment. But when she arrived Friday evening, the vibe was completely different from what I expected. She walked in with this calm, relaxed energy. Not loud. Not overly talkative. Just comfortable. She looked around the apartment, smiled at the chaos of student life, and said something like, "Well, at least no one's living with raccoons." Which honestly felt generous. Over dinner that night, she asked us questions about school, work, and life after graduation. But something about the way she spoke about money immediately stood out. Not in a flashy way. In a practical way. She had retired early. Which already made me curious. Because early retirement always sounds like something that only happens to tech CEOs or lottery winners. But she wasn't flashy at all. She talked about money the way someone talks about grocery shopping. Normal. Practical. Almost boring. Which made it feel real. But the moment that actually changed how I think about money happened the next morning. Saturday morning we went to a local farmer's market. The place was packed. Fresh fruit stands. Handmade goods. Coffee carts. People walking dogs everywhere. We wandered around for a while until she stopped at a produce stand. She picked up a big bag of apples. Then a jar of honey. Nothing unusual. The vendor rang it up and said, "That'll be $12. And that's when she did something that completely caught me off guard. She smiled warmly and said, "Would you do both for 10? No awkwardness. No pressure. Just a simple, friendly question. And the vendor immediately said, "Sure." Just like that. 2 seconds. Deal done. We walked away with the apples and honey, and I remember standing there thinking, wait. That worked? She didn't negotiate aggressively. She didn't argue. She just asked. And somehow that tiny moment stuck in my brain like a glitch in reality. Because in my head, prices had always felt like rules. You follow them. You don't question them. But clearly, she didn't see it that way. Later that afternoon we stopped by a small antique shop downtown. The place smelled like old books and wood polish. She slowly wandered through the store, looking at shelves and furniture with quiet curiosity. Eventually she found a lamp she liked. Vintage looking. Brass base. Soft yellow shade. The tag said $45. She picked it up, examined it for a moment, then walked to the counter. "Would you take 30 for this?" The shop owner didn't even seem surprised. He paused for a second and said, "I could do 35. She nodded immediately. "Perfect. Transaction complete. Again, no tension. No weirdness. Just a normal conversation. And I remember thinking something very specific in that moment. Why have I never tried this before? Not once in my life had I asked for a lower price on something like that. Not because I couldn't. But because I assumed I wasn't supposed to. But the moment that really blew my mind happened later that evening. We were sitting in the living room watching TV. Completely normal Saturday night. And she suddenly picked up her phone and said, "Oh right, I need to call my internet provider." Now, if you've ever dealt with internet companies, you know how this usually goes. Long hold times. Frustration. Awkward conversations. But she didn't seem annoyed at all. She dialed the number and calmly waited while the automated system did its thing. Eventually someone answered. And she said something incredibly simple. "Hi, I was just wondering if there are any current promotions or discounts available on my account." That's it. No threats. No complaints. Just curiosity. The call lasted maybe 10 minutes. When she hung up, she smiled and said, "Well, that saved me $18 a month." $18. Every month. Just for asking. I sat there staring at her like she'd just performed a magic trick. Because the truth is, I had the same internet provider. And I had never once asked them that question. Not even considered it. Later that night, I finally asked her something that had been sitting in my head all day. "Isn't that awkward?" She looked confused. "What part?" "Asking for discounts, negotiating, stuff like that." She thought about it for a second, then said something that honestly stuck with me more than anything else that weekend. "Everything is a conversation." She shrugged slightly. "People just forget to have it." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Because she wasn't talking about manipulation. She wasn't trying to trick people. She wasn't demanding special treatment. She was just asking questions. And giving the other person the chance to say yes. Or no. And apparently, yes happens more often than you'd think. By the end of the weekend, we roughly estimated she'd saved around $60 or $70. Not through extreme couponing. Not through complicated strategies. Just normal interactions. A farmer's market. A small shop. A phone call. Simple things. But what fascinated me most wasn't the money. It was the mindset. Because the difference between her and me wasn't knowledge. It was comfort. She was comfortable asking. Comfortable hearing no. Comfortable treating money conversations like normal conversations. And I realized something slightly uncomfortable about myself. I had been avoiding those conversations my entire life. Not because they were impossible. But because they felt socially risky. A few weeks after that visit, I decided to try it myself. My phone bill had been creeping up for months. Extra fees. Random increases. The usual stuff. Normally I would just sigh and pay it. But this time I remembered her voice saying, "Everything is a conversation." So I called the company. My hands were weirdly sweaty. Which is ridiculous for a phone call. But still. When the representative answered, I said the exact sentence I'd heard her use. "Hi, I was just wondering if there are any current promotions or discounts available for my account." There was a pause. Typing sounds. Then the guy said, "Well actually, we do have a loyalty discount I can apply. $10 off. Every month." Just like that. I hung up the phone feeling weirdly victorious. Not because of the money. But because something in my brain had shifted. That weekend taught me something that no financial article ever really explained clearly. Money isn't always about complicated strategies. Sometimes it's about comfort with conversation. Comfort asking questions. Comfort exploring options. Comfort realizing that many systems are more flexible than they appear. And the truth is, most people never try. Because we assume the answer will be no. Or we assume we're not supposed to ask. But apparently, a surprising number of people are perfectly happy to say yes. Months later, I still think about that weekend. Not because $70 is life-changing. But because the lesson behind it kind of is. One quiet sentence changed how I approach money now. Everything is a conversation. And the strange thing is, the more I test that idea, the more often it turns out to be true. Sometimes the biggest financial lessons don't come from textbooks or investment gurus. They come from watching someone calmly do something you never realized you were allowed to do. Ask. If this story made you rethink how money actually works, hit like and tell us in the comments. What's the best discount you've ever gotten just by asking? And if you love real stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to StoryX Daily for more incredible Reddit stories every week. Because sometimes, the simplest stories teach the biggest lessons.